In a dusty corner of a dying town, where fortunes faded faster than the paint peeling off storefronts, an old farmer in scuffed boots stepped into the county auction. And by the end of that day he would own it all. No one noticed Eli Walker when he shuffled past the gleaming SUVs and sharp suits. They were too busy laughing, too busy measuring worth in watches and wallet sizes. But sometimes the man you overlook is the one rewriting the ending. And this old farmer was about to teach them a lesson they'd never forget. The heat sat heavy over Wilcox County, draping the dusty main street like a worn-out quilt. Folks fanned themselves with old flyers as they filed into the town courthouse, where the county auction was being held. The building groaned under the weight of 100 whispered conversations, all buzzing about the same thing: land, and lots of it. Big men in polished boots and slick sunglasses leaned against expensive trucks outside, their laughter echoing off the stone walls. They passed cigars back and forth like they already owned the place. Behind them, in the shadow of a rusted water tower, a battered pickup rolled into town, coughing up a trail of dust. Eli Walker stepped out. He tugged the brim of his sun-bleached hat down low against the bright noon sun. His jeans were faded nearly white at the knees, and his boots had seen more seasons than most of the shiny men at the courthouse had seen birthdays. A few heads turned. Smirks followed. "Looky there," someone muttered, elbowing his buddy. "Old Eli's here to buy a piece of heaven with pocket change." They laughed, loud enough for Eli to hear. He didn't flinch, just hitched his belt, dusted off his hands, and made his slow way up the courthouse steps. Inside, the auction room buzzed like a hornet's nest. Rows of folding chairs sat in uneven lines, filled with men in tailored suits and women clutching leather binders. In the front, a raised platform waited, where the county auctioneer, a wiry man named Dale Simmons, adjusted a squealing microphone. At the very back, Chad Remington lounged in a chair like he owned it, tapping something on his gold-plated phone. His hair was perfect, his teeth perfect, his arrogance practically steaming off his skin. When he spotted Eli shuffling in, he grinned and leaned toward his neighbor. "Well, would you look at that? Old McDonald's come to town," Chad said loudly enough for several rows to hear. A ripple of laughter followed. Eli caught Chad's eye. He gave him a slow, easy nod, like a man tipping his hat to a neighbor. Chad just shook his head and went back to his phone. Dale tapped the mic. "All right, folks," he drawled. "Today we got parcels of land, some residential lots, some farm properties, all up for grabs. Rules are simple, highest bidder wins. Let's get started." The first parcel came up, a decent slice of farmland near the river. Chad shot his hand up without even looking. 50 grand, he said, disinterested. Murmurs rolled through the room. 50 grand was a high starting point. Nobody else moved, until a slow, steady voice spoke up from the back. 75, Eli said. Heads turned. Chairs squeaked as people twisted around to see him. Chad lifted his sunglasses, squinting. "You serious, old man?" Chad barked, half laughing. Eli said nothing, just rested his calloused hands on the chair in front of him. The auctioneer coughed into his hand, a little unsure. All right then. 75 going once." Chad shot a glare at Eli, then barked, 100. Eli didn't blink. 150, he said, his voice smooth as warm molasses. A stunned hush fell over the room. Chad laughed, shaking his head. "You can't even spell 150, Grandpa." 200, Eli said, without raising his voice. The auctioneer looked back and forth between them, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. Chad's face flushed red. He stood up, towering over the seated crowd. "Fine. 250. Let's see you beat that, old-timer." Eli tilted his head slightly. 300, he said. You could have heard a pin drop. The auctioneer cleared his throat, finally finding his voice. 300,000 to Mr. Walker. Going once? Going twice? Sold. Chad slumped back into his chair, stunned. And that was only the first lot. Eli smiled to himself and waited patiently for the next parcel to come up. He wasn't here to play. He was here to buy it all. The next parcel rolled onto the docket, a crumbling old farmstead out past Route 9. Folks said the well had gone dry years back, and the barn leaned like an old drunk, ready to fall with the next strong breeze. Chad smirked at the listing. He wouldn't touch that mess. He shot a cocky glance around the room and let his sunglasses slide back down onto his nose. 10,000. A thin man near the front offered. 15. Someone else piped up. Before the auctioneer could lift his gavel, Eli's voice floated from the back. 30. Dale Simmons blinked like he hadn't heard right. He shaded his eyes to peer into the dimness where Eli sat. 30,000 from Mr. Walker, he repeated, his voice uncertain. The bidders shuffled uncomfortably. Some craned their necks toward the back of the room, whispering. Chad sat forward, his mouth twisting. What's he doing? Buying up junk to plant his moonshine stills? He muttered, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Another ripple of laughter, but this time it was thinner, less sure. One by one the auctions ticked by. Every time Chad bid, Eli outbid him. Calmly, without even a hint of struggle. A prime riverfront plot? Chad. 500,000. Eli. 600. The old rail station lot? Chad. 350. Eli. 400. Even the rundown motel outside town, rumored to be haunted, ended up under Eli's name after a quick, effortless raise. Chad's tan started to look a little sickly under the courthouse lights. He barked at his assistant, a sweaty kid named Ricky, to call the bank. Each time, Ricky's face turned paler. By mid-afternoon, whispers filled the room like rising smoke. Where's he getting the money? Isn't he just some old farmer? Maybe he's crazy. Maybe not. The final straw came when the auctioneer called up lot number 47. A massive swath of timberland stretching clear to the county line. Chad jumped on it instantly. 1.2 million, he hollered, standing up and grinning wide at the crowd. Scattered applause broke out. Everyone figured that would scare off the old man. But then Eli, still sitting with his hands folded neatly in his lap, spoke again in that same slow, easy voice. 2 million. The room gasped. Chairs clattered as people half rose from their seats. Chad's mouth opened and closed like a hooked fish. That's impossible, he stammered. Dale Simmons tugged nervously at his collar. We'll need proof of funds at this point, he said, looking straight at Eli. Without a word, Eli reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a sealed envelope, handed it to a stunned clerk. Inside was a letter on heavy paper, embossed with the seal of First National Bank of Chicago. A letter verifying that Eli Walker had liquid funds in excess of $500 million. The clerk read it, turned sheet white, handed it to Dale without a word. Dale cleared his throat. His voice cracked like a boy's first sermon. The bid stands. Mr. Walker's credentials are verified. Silence slammed down on the room. Every eye turned to Eli. Every whisper died in throats. Eli just smiled and tipped his hat. Meanwhile, Chad Remington sat frozen in his chair, hands clenched into fists, his dreams of empire crumbling like dust under a boot heel. The laughter was over. Nobody was laughing now. The auction sputtered to a halt after that. No one dared raise a hand against Eli. Even the die-hard investors, the city-slick suits with deep pockets and deeper egos, sat stone still. The only sound was the low hum of the ceiling fans spinning lazily above. Chad Remington stood up, knocking his chair backward with a screech. "This is a joke," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Some backwoods hick comes in here flashing cash like a damn Vegas card shark, and we're just supposed to roll over?" Eli leaned against the wall at the back of the room, the brim of his hat shadowing his face. He said nothing, didn't move. Just watched Chad rant like a rooster crowing at a hurricane. "You're ruining real progress," Chad went on, his face reddening. "This town could have been something. High-rises, shopping centers, real money, not cows and corn and junkyards." Maggie Turner, the local schoolteacher, stood quietly near the door. She crossed her arms and gave Chad a slow, pitying shake of her head. Dale Simmons wiped his forehead with a crumpled handkerchief. "The auction rules are clear, Mr. Remington," he said carefully. "Mr. Walker's bids are valid. If you can't match 'em, well, that's how auctions work." Chad looked around wildly for support, but the people he thought would stand with him, the bankers, the lawyers, the land speculators, suddenly seemed very interested in their shoes, the ceiling, anywhere but at him. He turned on Eli, jabbing a finger. "You think you're better than me, old man? Hiding behind that country boy act? You're just another rich prick, no different from the rest of us." For the first time all day, Eli moved. Slowly, he pushed off the wall and stepped forward. His boots made soft thuds on the worn courthouse floor. He stopped a few feet from Chad, looked him square in the eye. "Difference is," Eli said, voice low and steady, "I remember where I come from." He let the words hang in the air. "You wanted to buy this town," Eli continued. "Turn it into something shiny and hollow. A place no one who lives here could ever afford to stay." Chad opened his mouth, but Eli kept going, voice rising just enough to carry. "I'm buying it to give it back." A murmur ran through the crowd like the first tremble of a coming storm. "You don't get it, son," Eli said, shaking his head sadly. "This land ain't just dirt and trees. It's Sunday picnics and first kisses and harvest dances. It's granddaddies showing grandkids how to bait a hook. You don't pave over that. You protect it." For a long, breathless moment, Chad just stared at him, chest heaving. Then he laughed, a sharp, ugly sound, and shoved past Eli on his way to the door. "You're all fools," Chad shouted over his shoulder. "You'll die broke, and no one will remember your names." The heavy doors swung shut behind him with a bang. Silence fell again. Eli adjusted his hat, nodded once to Dale Simmons, then turned and walked out into the sunshine, the light catching the silver in his hair like a crown. The courthouse behind him was no longer just a place where land changed hands. It was where the heart of Wilcox County had been saved. The next morning, Wilcox County woke up different. The news spread faster than wildfire on a dry July afternoon. Every diner, barbershop, and front porch hummed with the same story. Old Eli Walker, the man they all thought was just another worn-out farmer, had bought nearly every piece of land at the auction, and he wasn't planning to sell it off or tear it down. He was giving it back. Maggie Turner stood at the chalkboard of her small classroom, trying to get the kids to focus on their spelling lists. It wasn't working. Not when little Tommy Barker kept whispering, "My daddy says Mr. Walker's richer than the president," and giggles kept bursting out like popcorn in a skillet. At the diner, Sheriff Cal Holbrook sipped his black coffee and shook his head in amazement. "All these years," he said to nobody in particular, "all these damn years." And he never said a word. Across the street, at Remington Realty, the windows were dark. Chad's big gold-lettered sign hung a little crooked, as if even the building itself had lost faith in him overnight. Meanwhile, Eli Walker moved quietly through town. He didn't make speeches, didn't throw parades. Instead, he went about his business like he always had, stopping to pat the shoulders of old friends, shaking hands, listening more than talking. When he stopped by Maggie's schoolhouse that afternoon, the kids poured out like a flood, crowding around him with wide eyes and endless questions. "Is it true you're a billionaire, Mr. Walker? Did you buy the ice cream shop too? Can you buy us a swimming pool?" Eli chuckled, kneeling so he was eye level with the kids. His knees creaked, but he didn't mind. "Well now," he said, scratching his chin, "I reckon we can start with fixin' the playground first. Maybe after that we'll see about a pool." The children cheered, scattering like leaves in the wind. Maggie leaned against the doorframe, smiling warmly. She hadn't seen the town this alive in years. Eli caught her gaze and walked over, removing his hat. "Hope you don't mind me dropping by," he said. "You're more than welcome," Maggie said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. She hesitated. "Eli, why now? Why not tell folks who you really were sooner?" Eli looked out across the cracked basketball court and rusted swing sets. "Because it ain't about me," he said simply. "It's about them, about this town, about remembering that money's just a tool, It's what you build with it that counts. Maggie watched him, a lump rising in her throat. You think Chad Remington will ever understand that? She asked. Eli smiled, slow and sad. Everybody's got their own road to walk. Some are just rockier than others. For a moment, they stood there in the golden afternoon light, the dusty smell of the playground mixing with fresh-cut grass and the distant sound of kids laughing. And just like that, hope began to sink roots deep into Wilcox County again. While Eli stitched the town back together with quiet grace, Chad Remington stewed in the dark. His office smelled like stale coffee and expensive cologne. Empty whiskey glasses cluttered his mahogany desk. The once proud Remington Realty sign had been yanked down that morning. Not by vandals, but by Chad himself, in a fit of rage. He had lost everything. The investors who used to flood his inbox now ghosted him. The bank called, cold and polite, asking when he planned to settle his debts. The luxury SUV sat in the parking lot, a gleaming reminder of promises he could no longer keep. Chad stared out the grimy window at the town below. He hated it. Hated the cracked sidewalks and the sagging porches. Hated the slow way everyone talked, the stupid smiles they wore like badges. They should have thanked him for trying to drag them into the future. Instead, they rallied around an old farmer in worn boots and a beat-up truck. Chad's stomach twisted. Bitterness sat heavy on his tongue. A soft knock rattled the door. "What?" Chad barked. The door creaked open. Ricky, his former assistant, poked his head in, hat in hand. "Hey, just stopping by to see if you needed anything," Ricky said, his voice small. Chad narrowed his eyes. "You here to gloat?" Ricky shook his head. "No, sir. I heard you might be moving out. Figured you could use a hand." Chad snorted. "What, you feel sorry for me now?" Ricky hesitated. "Maybe a little," he admitted. "But mostly, I guess I remember when you first came back here. You wanted to make something of yourself. Thought that was pretty cool." Chad looked away, the words hitting harder than he expected. For a long moment, neither said anything. The only sound was the tired buzz of a dying ceiling fan. Finally, Chad sighed. His shoulders sagged. "You ever wish you could go back?" he muttered. "Start over. Make different choices." Ricky shrugged. "Don't we all?" Chad rubbed his face with both hands, the mask of arrogance sliding off like old paint. "Yeah," he whispered. "Yeah, I wish that." Ricky shuffled awkwardly, then said, "You know, Mr. Walker's looking for help. I heard he's got plans for the land. New farms, co-ops, maybe even a market downtown. Word is, he's hiring local." Chad stared at him. "You think he'd hire me?" he asked, the disbelief thick in his voice. Ricky smiled a little. "Ain't about what you were, man. It's about what you want to be next." The words hung there, simple and heavy. For the first time in a long while, Chad felt something crack inside. Not anger, not pride. Something quieter. Something like shame. Something like hope. He stood slowly, brushing dust from his once pristine jacket. "All right," Chad said. "Maybe it's time I stopped running my mouth and started using my hands." Ricky grinned. "That's the spirit." As they stepped out into the warm afternoon, Chad blinked against the sun. The same sun that had shined down on Wilcox County long before he tried to buy it. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a place for him here, if he was willing to earn it. Spring crept into Wilcox County like a shy guest. Early buds peeking through the thawed ground, birds tuning up their songs in the bare trees. At the edge of town, past the railroad tracks and the sleepy rows of shotgun houses, the old McAllister farm was coming alive again. Only now it wasn't just one family working the fields, it was the whole town. Eli stood under the broad sweep of a pecan tree, watching with quiet satisfaction. Children ran barefoot through furrows of freshly tilled earth. Young couples planted vegetable starts with dirty hands and wide smiles. Even the older folks, the ones who usually kept to rocking chairs and memories, came out to lend a hand. And there, down by the old chicken coops, was Chad Remington. He wore a plain t-shirt and battered jeans, a ball cap pulled low over his forehead. No Rolex, no tailored suits, Just a man with a shovel, turning over soil one heavy scoop at a time. At first, folks had been wary, watching him from the corners of their eyes, waiting for the old Chad to show up, the loudmouth, the schemer. But he didn't. He listened more than he talked. He asked for advice, took the worst jobs without complaint. Mucking out stalls, fixing broken fences, hauling heavy sacks of feed. And slowly, the town warmed to him again. Maggie Turner approached Eli under the tree, wiping her hands on her overalls. "You did a good thing," she said, nodding toward the busy fields. Eli chuckled softly. "I just opened the gate. They're the ones runnin' through it." Maggie looked at him, something unspoken flickering in her eyes. "You really think people can change?" Eli tipped his hat back and squinted at the blue sky. "I reckon people don't change so much as they remember who they were meant to be," he said. They stood together a moment, watching Chad lift a laughing little girl onto his shoulders, her pigtails bouncing as she shrieked with delight. "Guess that makes two of you," Maggie said, smiling. Eli turned to her, eyebrows raised. She laughed, brushing a streak of dirt from his shirt. "You, Mr. Walker. You remembered too." For the first time in what felt like forever, Eli felt the tightness in his chest ease. He thought back to long nights alone in big city hotels, boardrooms filled with suits who measured a man's worth by the size of his wallet. None of it ever filled him up like this, like the laughter of children, the smell of turned earth, the simple weight of good work well done. He looked at Maggie, her hair messy, her face lit by the sun. "I think," Eli said slowly, "this might just be the best crop I ever planted." She smiled, a real wide-open smile, and took his hand. Together, they walked down to join the others, their footsteps stirring up the sweet scent of new beginnings. By early summer, Wilcox County didn't just look different, it felt different. Where empty lots once sat choked with weeds and old junkers, new gardens burst into bloom. Tomatoes, squash, corn, and sunflowers stretched their green fingers skyward. The old train depot, which had been rotting into the ground, was transformed into a bustling farmer's market. Every Saturday, stalls popped up like wildflowers, fresh honey, hand-carved furniture, preserves in glinting jars. People came from neighboring counties just to get a taste of the revival. The diner expanded, adding a big shaded porch where bluegrass bands played on Friday nights. Kids splashed in the brand-new public swimming pool. Old folks taught young ones how to tie fishing lures down by the riverbank. And the heart of it all, quiet and steady, was Eli Walker. He didn't sit behind a big desk issuing orders. He worked shoulder to shoulder with everyone else, repairing barns, painting school walls, passing out lemonade at the softball games. And people listened to him not because of his money, but because of the way he carried himself. Steady as bedrock, honest as the sunrise. Even Chad Remington found his footing. He ran a little produce stand at the market now, Remington's Fresh Picks, hand-lettered on a crooked wooden sign. His face, once tight with arrogance, had softened. He smiled easy these days, laughed at himself, lent a hand without expecting anything in return. One afternoon, Eli found him repairing a broken wagon wheel outside the depot. Chad looked up, wiped his hands on a rag. "Hey, Mr. Walker." Eli tipped his hat. "Chad." There was a pause, the kind that used to be full of tension, but now felt more like understanding. "I been meanin' to say," Chad started, then cleared his throat. "I'm sorry. For before. For everything." Eli smiled gently. "Takes a bigger man to say it than to pretend it never happened." Chad ducked his head, embarrassed but relieved. "You did good, son," Eli added. "Real good." Chad's grin broke through, boyish and a little shy. "Thanks. Means a lot. Comin' from you." They shook hands. A real handshake, firm and honest. And the past slipped away like mist burned off by the sun. As Eli walked on, he heard someone call his name. Turning, he saw Maggie hurrying toward him, her face flushed with excitement. "Come quick," she said, grabbing his hand. "You gotta see this." She led him to the town square, where a crowd had gathered. In the center, a group of kids was unveiling a plaque. Hand-painted, a little crooked, but shining bright under the afternoon sun. It read, "In honor of Eli Walker, for reminding us that true riches grow from the heart." Eli stood frozen, overwhelmed. The townspeople clapped and cheered. Some wiped tears from their eyes. The kids beamed up at him, proud as anything. For the first time in his long life, Eli Walker, the man who had once had everything but felt empty, realized he was home. Truly, finally, home. Late that evening, the town square glowed under strings of warm lights. Families sat on picnic blankets, sharing fried chicken and peach cobbler. Old men played checkers on barrel tops. Young couples slow-danced barefoot in the grass as a local band played soft, sweet tunes. Eli Walker sat on a wooden bench at the edge of it all, a paper plate balanced on his knee, watching the town he loved laugh and sing under the stars. Maggie slid into the seat beside him, handing him a cold glass of sweet tea. "You look like a man who's finally at peace," she teased. Eli chuckled, the sound low and easy. "Feels that way." They sat in companionable silence, the air thick with the smell of honeysuckle and barbecue smoke. Fireflies blinked lazily across the field. After a while, Maggie nudged him. "You know, you could have built anything with all that money. Mansions, yachts, your own private island." Eli smiled without looking away from the scene before him. "I did build something," he said. "Built a future." She rested her head on his shoulder, and he didn't move, just sat there, breathing in the life he had helped restore. Across the way, Chad Remington hoisted a giggling boy onto his shoulders, his laughter blending into the music. Sheriff Holbrook showed off dance moves that had the teenagers howling with laughter. Dale Simmons sat with his wife, a contented look softening his stern features. It wasn't perfect, no town ever was, but it was theirs. Not bought, not sold, not paved over and forgotten. Saved, nurtured, loved. Eli closed his eyes for a moment, letting it all soak in, the laughter, the music, the warmth of a place that had chosen to heal instead of break. Tomorrow there would be work to do, always would be, but tonight there was only this. The sweet hum of belonging, the tender ache of hope, and the quiet, certain knowledge that he had come full circle. At long last, Eli Walker was exactly where he was meant to be. Home. Years later, Wilcox County was known far beyond its borders. Not for malls or high-rises, but for something far rarer. A town that remembered who it was. Visitors came to the Saturday market and stayed for the Sunday potlucks. Children who once dreamed of leaving now dreamed of growing something here. Businesses, families, legacies. The land thrived. The people thrived. And at the center of it all, a modest plaque in the square, weathered by time but polished by loving hands, still bore Eli Walker's name. Not as a man who conquered the town, but as the man who helped it remember its soul. Every spring, the first planting was marked with a simple gathering under the pecan tree where Eli had once stood. Families would kneel in the dirt, pressing seeds into the earth, teaching their children what Eli had taught them. That true riches aren't in what you own, but in what you give. That the greatest legacy isn't wealth, it's roots that last. And somewhere, in the rustling of the trees and the warm wind over the fields, it always felt like Eli was still there, tipping his hat and smiling. Home, always home. True wealth isn't counted in dollars or deeds. It's measured in the hands you lift, the hearts you heal, and the roots you leave behind.